Oh. Oh. Good job, honey.
Shocking video out of Swannanoa, North Carolina shows the sheer power of the floodwaters that swept through the region during Hurricane Helene.
Holy.
Residents sheltering in a third-floor apartment watched as the river, swollen from nearly 800 millimeters of rain, carried debris toward their swamped building. They are left speechless as a shipping container slams into a utility pole and is instantly crushed like an aluminum can. A short time later, an entire home flows down the torrent toward their building.
Hey, there's a building coming!
Oh, come on, baby. Miss us. It's gonna hit the pool though, right here.
The structure barely slows down as it's sliced through the middle.
It just ripped it in half.
A close call for these people, but the floods took a heavy toll on the region, destroying countless homes and businesses near the rivers.
That missed our building by...
You ain't mad? Cause I'm mad as hell. You know that mad that you just get so angry that you just cry about it? You're so mad you just cry about it. That's how mad I am. Like, they have lost everything. Everything. Imagine walking outside of your house and seeing nothing that you ever worked hard for, just gone. I've seen houses just completely just slide down the mountain. I'm seeing people making videos because they can't find family members. How are they supposed to apply for something if they don't have electricity that does not get their baby fed in this moment? Like, the job they had, the building is gone. Like, how is nobody mad? I'm so fucking mad.
This is another story from Western North Carolina. This is from an Iraq veteran who's in the area. He says this entire area is a war zone. Even if not directly destroyed by floodwaters, there are men, women, and children starving, without water and sanitation, no fuel. People can't get to any distro points because they have no fuel. People are walking on foot and dragging wagons. The majority of federal and state assets are being diverted to the incorporated areas of Asheville, Black Mountain, etc., and without a deliberate effort yet into the rural unincorporated areas. This was written earlier in the week. I can confirm now that helicopter crews are working day in, day out, all day, 24/7, to evacuate people from those smaller unincorporated towns as well as get supplies into them. He goes on, people are suffering and communities are rapidly moving to isolation and self-defense and policing. Trigger warning for this next part. There are bodies floating down the rivers. There are bodies stuck in the tops of trees. Linemen entering destroyed areas are finding dozens of children as young as 3 walking through the mud near naked, crying for their parents, some with ropes still tied around their arms, attached to broken lumber, where clearly their dead parents had last ditch tied them to something. I was talking to a lineman yesterday, how he's finding heads and limbs every time debris is removed. Entire communities are gone. Just gone. Nothing to repair. And in some of the areas, just no one to even help anymore. Just bodies, with a stench increasing by the day. The death count will be in the thousands. Desperation is increasing. Local rural gas stations, markets, etc. have clear militias forming with men in hodgepodge gear and rifles patrolling. We are self-policing now.
It's Monday, October the 14th, 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. I just wanted to give an update on the missing from Hurricane Helene in Western North Carolina and Eastern Tennessee. It's a lot more than we're being told, so trigger warning. So this is the spreadsheet that's updated daily on the missing people from Hurricane Helene. It was last updated at 4:30 p.m. today. If it's red, they're still missing. And family members are confirming this and clarifying their family members, and it's updated daily. There are so many people still missing. We're only in the B's. We're not going to see this on the news. The good news is there are a lot of people that have been found. But why is nobody talking about all these people that are still missing? This is awful. Here we are, how many days later? Like, we're in the teens now. We're only in the C's, y'all. So many people still missing. Praise God for the ones that were found and are okay. But this is a lot. We're only in the F's. You get it. I could keep going. The report is in my link tree. But something needs to be done, y'all. There are so many people still missing. And people need to be aware of it. Only in the H's. Please repost, share, get this out there. We need to find these people. This is heartbreaking. Pray for these families. Pray for North Carolina, Tennessee, and all the areas where all these families still have missing loved ones, and those that are deceased. Keep praying and keep helping.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Probably Canceled podcast. My name is Bridget, and I am your host. And today we have probably the most important subject that I've spoken about in a long time. It's a current event that is impacting a huge number of people in our country. We're going to be talking about Hurricane Helene and the fallout in North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, Virginia, and Florida. All of these states were affected, but right now I really want to put a focus on Western North Carolina, and I have Al here, who is on the ground in the region and doing a lot of work in the aftermath and recovery, a lot of mutual aid volunteering, and I just really wanted to bring somebody on who knows the region, has been on the ground, and has firsthand accounts of what's going on, because the mainstream media is not talking about it at all. So thank you so much for coming, Al. I really appreciate you being here. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. We're a little over 2 weeks out, so I've started to rest, and I'm in one of my favorite hollers on this land up in Madison County. And it got cold, and the leaves are starting to change. So here I am this morning.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you have a safe place to be right now. And just to start off, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and also the work that you've been doing on the ground in your region?
Yeah, I'll just talk a little about who I am in relationship to this place. I'm Al, not from here, but I've been here on and off since 2017. I've lived in Polk County, south of Asheville, Madison County, where I am in this moment, north of Asheville, where Marshall is, and then for the past year and a half, I've lived in Philly in between that. but I have dearly beloveds in this land, and will always love this land. Originally was here for farming, and then moved back a year and a half ago and went to massage school here. And I live in a cooperative house in like kind of downtown West Asheville, like walking distance to the main Haywood Strip. So that is where I was for most of the disaster. As things got hyper local, and now I'm just starting to see my friends who live in different hollers and see in different parts of the county and see where they were. But yeah, that's what I do. My partner is an ER nurse and happened to be visiting me during the disaster. And so we tapped in with friends, and they were like, oh, I just really need to do like medical triage. Like they weren't working at a hospital, and they were like, oh, well, I know how it works when this happens and people are going to flood the ER. So like, we just need to set up a tent in a really public place so people can come for medical information. And we hooked up with medic teams. And so we went to the Double Crown, which is like a popular bar up the road. And then we like collaborated with the bartenders who were bringing IBC's like big water cubes down. And then suddenly we had a distribution, and suddenly the fire department is telling us that we are the second biggest, most effective medical operation in the city, second to Mission Hospital, which is the big hospital, which is like we've actually have some nurses defecting from there because they're being really shady to their workers. So I'm like, I think we're actually better than Mission Hospital right now, but that's the line from the fire department. Yeah, it's been a very powerful, like mutual aid actually works, especially in crisis time. And you just tell people, hey, we have medics at the Double Crown 1 to 5, and then suddenly we have a whole operation and people know. And especially when we don't have phones and no internet and service, it's all word of mouth, and it's been really gorgeous. So that's where I've been in all of this right now.
Yeah, thank you so much, and all of your friends. Please pass on my thanks to them, and thanks of everybody. I'm listening to this, I'm sure, because as horrible as the situation has been, I'm absolutely gutted by this situation. It's been really, really beautiful to see everybody banding together to help and serve their community, and people coming from all over the country to help and do really, really difficult manual labor and really long hours and barely sleeping, barely eating, barely taking care of themselves, but putting political differences aside too, to just help everybody in need. And I mean, politics does not matter. I know people are trying to also politicize this disaster as well. But on the ground, it doesn't matter what your politics are. If you're hungry, somebody will feed you. And that's really beautiful to see. And I mean, all these people coming in with heavy equipment and doing what the government hasn't been doing, and trying to rescue people or recover, remake bridges so people can escape where they are. But I'm sure we'll talk more about what's going on in the situation there. But just to get an idea of what's going on, the death toll in the media currently is stuck at 230 total for all states totals affected by Hurricane Helene. And I keep checking every day, and the death toll is just frozen right there. But from what I'm hearing from people on the ground that I've seen on TikTok, which is the only place I can get real information on this, unfortunately, people are saying that it's a worse disaster than Katrina was. And I think a lot of that is due to the terrain of the region. So could you describe to people who haven't been there, who haven't been to this area of the country, what terrain are you dealing with in your day-to-day?
Yeah, I mean, so it's a wild spot. It's gorgeous out here. There's a reason people are drawn to it. These mountains are old. These mountains are weathered down, but these mountains are big. I can check. Numbers don't stick in my brain. Mount Mitchell, you can look it up. It's over 4,000 footer, but I'm also just like, I don't remember numbers. Big mountains with hollers, which is like what we call like the flat parts. Like mountains have valleys, and there's like so many mountains. And so everyone, obviously we build our roads in the hollers and the flat parts between the mountains, which is why obviously all of our, like, so many of our roads are destroyed, because this is an area of rivers and mountains. It's like quite paradisal. It's a temperate rainforest. It's like there's millions of birds. It's like super high biodiversity. It's like a really, these mountains have like a really long history. There's a ton of herbalists here. There's very, like, everyone here who lives particularly out a little bit in the county is like wildly competent, chainsaws, ATVs, like old ways of being, harvests acorns, make acorn flour. Like, people know how to live, people know how to take care of each other. Up where I am right now, like all in the counties, it's wells and spring water. I have a lot of friends that live off grid, is kind of the culture. But yeah, like big, like so many creeks, big rivers crossing through all of town and all of the hollers. There's so many different rivers. We'll talk about different river names in the different sections, because all of the rivers flooded and they all have a different trajectory and like a little bit of a different terrain. In the east, it's a little bit more flat, which is like Swananoa, Black Mountain, which was like a really tragic place. And like Asheville is a city, but it gets real rural real fast. And like people, my friends are living like half an hour up a dirt road. If we're ready for one little anecdote, like some of my friends who live in Barnardsville, which is still Buncombe County, still like the county of Asheville, not quite out of the county yet, live on communal land up a dirt road. And like, to get anywhere, there's all of these little bridges, and with the rivers and the creeks running in it, and all of those little, like not all, but most of the little bridges just washed out during the storms. So like so many people were stuck in their hollers. Our friends who live in Barnardsville live up a road where the bridge washed out, connecting them to the rest of town, except for one I-beam. And our friend Francis and a couple of their friends crossed the I-beam while there was still water running over it. And well, because they had to, because they all came down their drives onto the road and were like, had no power and no phones. And we're like, okay, it's us, we're out here. So Francis crossed the I-beam, and with a couple of our friends as well, and then got to the Barnardsville Highway, which is the main road, and like happened, like one of our other friends was driving by, and there's no communication. And there's this very much like, okay, what do we do? How do we hold each other? Like, they rebuilt the bridge a couple of days later, but everyone was just like, okay, we meet here at noon tomorrow. Like, we run up and down the road. We tell everyone we meet here at noon, and that's how we have each other. And then there's been a very beautiful distribution spot in Barnardsville that was just here at noon, and now there's a huge hub. So like, that's what it's like. I don't know if you want more specifics on the terrain. Beautiful waterfalls, rivers everywhere. Like, you can go swimming everywhere. Like, there's this waterfall that we always go to that like makes me feel like I'm in a tropical, like not in this country at all. Really deep wooded forest, lush mountain valley river situation.
Yeah, it's so gorgeous, and it's really dense, and most of the little dirt roads are named something creek because there's creeks everywhere, water flowing everywhere. It's part of why there was so much devastation with the flooding, is because there are just creeks everywhere, and people build their houses next to the creek because it's beautiful. And now we have, so many houses lost to the floods, houses literally carried away by the floods, and landslides taking out entire communities, entire towns. Chimney Rock is, at least the main part of Chimney Rock, is completely gone.
Yep.
And I hitchhiked through Western North Carolina in 2011, and I just have this most amazing memory getting picked up by this really cool old guy in his old Lincoln car, and him driving me and my friend through the mountains, through the Blue Ridge Mountains. And it was about this time of year, so the leaves were turning and the Eagles was playing on the radio. And it's just this really beautiful memory that I have driving through the Blue Ridge, and I could look to my left, and down in the valley way below me, I saw Asheville. I've never been to Asheville. That's the only thing I've seen of it, is that it's literally in a bowl.
Yeah.
It's a bowl surrounded by mountains. And so when I heard about the severe flooding that happened there and the devastation that happened there, I was like, oh shit, like it's literally a bowl catching rainwater. And those people, I mean, so many people are dead. And so many people in Asheville were homeless to begin with. I mean, Asheville's known for their large homeless population. And it's all gone. This whole region's just all gone. And I don't know, it's going to be years until anything is recovered, I'm sure. And so I don't even really know where to begin in this conversation. I guess, what was your experience? You were there for the hurricane. What was that like? Did you realize at first how devastating things were? Because everybody lost power. So the areas that weren't as affected, I've been hearing that a lot of people didn't really realize how bad things actually were until like Saturday night, when they were able to access some kind of reception and see what was going on. How was that for you? What was your experience?
Yeah, I think we didn't get service back until, maybe Saturday or Sunday. And like information comes in all the time. Like, I'm always learning the extent of the devastation. And like there were friends out in the counties that we didn't hear for a week, and you just had to trust that your people were safe, And some of them weren't, I know dead kids in Yancey County in Green Mountain.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, those kids were really perfect, and they lived by the Tow River in Green Mountain, and they they were trying to evacuate, and so the rivers rose in different places between 25 and 30 feet, which is obviously not a survivable thing if you're on foot. And my experience was pretty chill because I live in a part of West Asheville that's pretty high up, and my like home is kind of right near the highway, so it's protected by like a wind tunnel. And some trees fell on our neighbor's property, but like we have bamboo surrounding our house, and the bamboo just kind of like bent all the way to the ground and sprung right back up. I don't know if everyone understands the way that like it was actually two storms that converged and hit Asheville like a zipper. And so it was like Wednesday night, the water, like it started to rain, and like my restaurant job closed early because of like Asheville floods all the time. Like it'll rain a lot, and then like water will be up to the bottom of my car when I'm driving in downtown on Merriman, and I'm like, oop, I took the wrong road. Like this place floods, and it floods more and more all the time, and people know. So like I saw on Instagram my friends who live in Marshall, which is out here in Madison County. Marshall is like if you don't know about Marshall, it's like a super sweet rural downtown, has a lot of history. The like old timer rugged individualism on this land is like really deep and old, and like knowledge ways of being in this area are like really, really strong. And a lot of people have moved here within the past like 10, 12 years. And there's like a lot of like Instagram famous herbalists and artists. And like, it's like a small town where there's like the downtown and then a railroad and then an island in the middle where there's art studios and a reconverted what used to be a high school. And so we saw all of our friends that had art studios in there were preparing, and they were like moving their kilns as high as possible. Everyone in downtown Marshall was like moving everything they could as high as possible, being like, it's going to flood. We know that it completely flooded. Downtown Marshall doesn't exist anymore. The railroad tracks are spaghetti. The studio, the high school is gone. The mud is toxic. It's been like a big cleanup place, but because there were so many chemical plants upstream, like when you go into downtown Marshall to clean it up, you have respirators, Tyvek suits, all of that. But like we didn't know that then. We were just I just saw my friends on Instagram being like, "Hey, I'm putting my kiln as high as I possibly can," and we were just like, "Oh, it's a little rain." My partner actually flew into Asheville Airport on Thursday morning, and we were just afraid that their flight wouldn't make it. But it was just rain at that point, and the destruction was Thursday night. So the 26 was flooded. The highway was flooded. And I was able to drive at like 10 a.m. and like it was scary and it was raining, but like I made it to the airport and back, and there were crews like dealing with the mudslides, but you could still drive the highway, which they later on like Friday kind of closed off. And we got reports because as we got a lot of our comrades in Atlanta came up with supplies and like medic crews, but they, because of the highways were closed and also just maybe like security controls, they closed the highway at the airport going south on 26. So like it wasn't until Sunday that individual medic teams were able to get in at all, or supply drops, and you needed what they're calling hall passes. So you only, if you were with the state, could you get aid in until a couple days in. So like we learned later that our friends were trying to get us, that, you know, obviously knew immediately what was happening, or trying to bring us stuff, and were turned away by the state from the south. So that's really cool. But we didn't know that at the time. And we were just listening to the radio because that's all that happened. Like my phone stopped working on Friday. I was like my best friend was supposed to get married on Saturday. So I was like calling him like in their backyard in Mills River, which is like near Hendersonville, which is south. And he was just like, I think we're just not getting married. And then I didn't have a phone at all after that. We got that phone call done. And then, and I was like, oh, like maybe it's just because like we don't have power because we don't have internet, and that like, I just never realized how bad the service is, like not realizing that like all of the cell towers are down. And so that's why like my service is really bad. And then like not expecting to just not have a phone. Which was like, my partner and I talked about this a lot. We're just like, you know, we're prepared for like no water, no power, but like grid down's a whole different thing. And like walkie-talkies and radios don't work well when there's water in the air and mountains, like line of sight. Obviously radios are hard, but like, so yeah, it took a long time for people to get to find each other. And so the first few days was just like kind of recon, figuring it out, like going on walks where we could and like talking to people. The city did broadcasts at 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. on the radio. We sat on our little porch with our crank radio and we learned what we needed to learn, which was like chaotic, pretty disorganized, not that helpful. And then they're like, oh, like we are translating it into Spanish and putting it on Facebook Live. And it's like, who the fuck is going, like, Facebook Live? You need internet for that.
Yeah.
What do you mean? How is anyone ever gonna know? Which like later in my story, like a few days later, we like the dishwasher at my work lives in like a Spanish speaking like trailer park neighborhood up New Leicester Highway, and so we ended up doing distro drops there just by like relationship, where it's just like we were out there and like brought medics and we're like and got people their medicines. We're just like, holy shit, like you didn't know? Like, oh, I can't even tell you what radio station to turn on because they're not broadcasting it in Spanish. So how would you know? And it's literally just us because we just like happened to like, because the bartenders and the bouncers from the Double Crown and I were just like, we're going. Like, that's crazy.
That's because the government's like where to be found.
I mean, they're here. They're airdropping stuff into Yancey County. I had a man call me from Little Switzerland. We were like giving out our number, like a Google Voice number at some point. We were sending like later into our distro life, like last week, we were like sending out supplies to like like over an hour out. And like a man called my Google Voice number from Little Switzerland and was like, hey, the government keeps dropping, like doing helicopter drops for this food pantry that I have. And they've just like wrecked my shit. And like, can you get me like a tractor trailer truck body that locks, because they keep dropping me supplies and I don't have a place to put them. So like U-Haul worked with us and we got them a truck body to store stuff in.
That's good.
But it's like, the supply stuff has been crazy because there's obviously like the government is doing some stuff, but then also like doesn't know where a lot of stuff is. And like, you know, this also comes to like a lot of people who are doing supply drops to like the large Section 8 housing communities, but then there's smaller ones where like after that everyone's like, oh, like the like PVA, D-Review, which are like the big Section 8 housing communities, are like, everyone's like, oh, they're good. And we're just like, we have guys who like live there and like know everything that's going on. And they're like, no one has come to this little one. So that was like a smaller thing where it's like there wasn't government aid there, or like it wasn't fast enough. I mean, by my standards, when no one has food, water, or internet, if you're coming in 5 days later, that's a little too late, bud.
Yeah, it's a little late, especially so like you mentioned, it's a lot of, I mean, it gets rural real fast,
Mhm.
real fast. I mean, you just go 5 minutes up a dirt road and it's like almost kind of in the middle of nowhere. And a lot of these dirt roads have like one house at the end or two houses at the end, and
Mhm.
very little infrastructure, where that if that road goes out, they're just trapped there. So you have people deep in the woods who, I mean, and it's all low income families, usually people who have lived there for decades and decades and decades and grew up there in
Mhm.
the middle of the woods, with who are just trapped. And who, I mean, we don't even know how many people are just starving to death 2 weeks later in their homes, or elderly people who haven't had access to their medications or oxygen.
Mhm.
There's just people who are abandoned because for the helicopters that are there trying to do rescues, there's no place for them to land
Yeah.
in dense trees.
Yeah.
You know, you got to have some kind of field to land in, or even to be able to locate the house underneath the trees, you know, to even be able to see the home. I saw videos of people out in that kind of stranded situation. If they could find like any open area where there's just grass and no trees, some guy was like took a mirror and was trying to flash a mirror up into the sky for a helicopter to notice them, that they were even there at all,
Yeah.
which was really a smart way to do it. But thank God the helicopter pilot noticed the flashing reflection on his windshield and was able to get them supplies. But
Yeah.
there's people that are still just trapped out there um, for, I mean, it's really bleak. It's really fucking dark what's going
Totally.
on.
Totally. And if you're open to like a little bit of pushback, um it's like the other way to look at it is it's like an incredibly resilient area where people really know what they're doing. And so like people live out here for a reason. Like I'm thinking about like one of my teachers at school who's from Madison County and has like, you know, told me about his Mima who is a sharecropper, and like he lives in the house that like his grandfather built, and like his Mima was a sharecropper and she'd work 12-hour days, and then she would work her own land, and then they didn't have refrigeration, and she'd put all their food in mason jars in the river. And like that's who he comes from, and that's who's out there of like, yeah, poverty, but like so knowledgeable about how to be here and what to do. And this is like a very like we take care of us rugged individual place. So like part of the reason that like FEMA apparently was being like, y'all don't really need us, which is like, hey, fuck you, could you help? But like we were getting reports when we were like, the fire department put us in contact, like the fire department came to us at our dive bar and was like, can you come to this meeting? Y'all are so well organized. So the fire department invited us to a meeting, and we met other people who were doing disaster relief, who especially we had some contacts with people who have done disaster relief in other hurricanes after like have done this multiple times in multiple hurricane disaster responses. And we're like, this area is like really, really ahead of the game. Like it feels shitty when you're in it. You're like, I know that there's people that don't have any food or water. What do you mean we're fucking ahead of the game? But people, like the funny thing is that people have always come here and lived here because it's a climate resilient place. People there, this is a prepper haven. People live
Yeah.
here because they're planning for the long term to be here, and they have
Yes.
generators, they have well water, they know their neighbors, they have wood stoves. They're like, you know, people that live out the county, like obviously people are not fine and people are absolutely stranded, and also people are fine. And part of the reason why there's like, they're not fine in the long haul. Our economy has been absolutely devastated. We are not fine. And like everyone had, like a lot of people were prepared for this and are thinking about this in this way. So that's part of the reason that like we were ahead of the game, is that like people had shit to share. People were ready. People know how to live off grid. People like, if you live out there, you have a stock of food. You're not stupid. You're used to living out there. In Yancey County, which is like about an hour from Asheville, depending on where it is, which has one of like a really, really intense devastation. All of the bridges washed out. Like one of my friends lives in an artist studio that's an hour away, and there's 5 bridges between their house and the main road, which are all gone. And so people are everyone here has a chainsaw, everyone knows how to use it. So like there's trees on everyone's houses, and every neighbor is like, immediately together cutting down the chainsaws, fixing people's houses, clearing the roads. Like, yeah, FEMA was here, but like so was every neighbor, like this is a land full of guys that know how to use chainsaws. And like up in Yancey County, like my friend was telling me that like, yeah, okay, there's 5 bridges between their house and the highway. And people were smart about it, and they like, first of all, everyone dug trenches to save their own houses for flooding. Like that's what my friend did when it was raining. They just grabbed their shovel and they diverted all the water so that their warehouse didn't flood.
That's really smart.
Like we are incredibly resilient. Everyone has all like so many skills in that way. So like just to reframe a little bit, like that rugged individualism, like obviously like pros and cons, but like we know how to save each other, and so people like built out, like dug out a little bit around the bridges so that like I don't really understand it because this is not what my brain is, but like people use shovels and moved the earth around where the bridge should have been so that you could drive with an ATV and then eventually get a car. And so like my friends who live in spots where there's 5 bridges blown out drove out 3 days later just because the community took care of it. Like no one was there.
It's been amazing.
But everyone on the road. So yeah. It's like
I've been seeing just videos that people are able to post when they have internet connection, and it's been so inspiring seeing people bring supplies and food, water, medication up a dirt road using pack mules.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Yes, I saw an incredible video showing that, and apparently they were doing that all throughout the mountain. And we have the Cajun Navy rescuing people, and people bringing their construction vehicles to go and repair roads. Not the government doing it, just people bringing all their construction gear and just taking the time out of their life, even if they live over in Georgia or Tennessee or other parts of North Carolina.
And also
all of this is
yeah,
so cool.
I mean, another story that pops into my mind is like, there's like big like outdoors bro culture. So like in Swannanoa, there were people saving people in kayaks. Like in Swannanoa, the river rose like over 25 feet. And so like mudslides happened, entire houses just slid down and were destroyed. Like we have people who are just like, oh, the like mountain next to mine just slid away, but then my house was fine. But then the river rose and just carried away like so many houses, just floated down the river. And so we have friends who climbed onto their roof because that was the only way that they wouldn't drown, and were on the roof of their houses. And then guys came out in kayaks and rescued them one by one off the roof of their houses. So you only fit one person in a kayak. So we have guys just kayaking out to like many times to like get every single person that's surviving by standing on the roof of their house. And so that's how we have friends who are alive. Because of that kayak bro just went out there.
Oh my God. It's been, first of all, I'm so glad that they survived. I don't even know how they got on the roof of their house, first of all. But yeah, to see the response of just everyday civilians, it's just been, I've been so inspired by it. It's been super beautiful. And like we mentioned before, politics doesn't even matter when everyone is needing food and water. Nobody's caring about what side of the political divide you're on. They'll give you food if they have it. People are sharing everything. I hear people who have like some sort of resources at all are denying donations because they are saying, give it to somebody who needs it more than me. And just there's this general vibe of camaraderie, and I'm just super inspired by that. Also on the topic of vibes, what's the general vibe been on the ground? How's everybody doing psychologically?
Can I just speak to your last point? Can I just say one thing about your last point?
Yeah.
It's like true in some ways, and I also just want to point out that like people don't stop being people when there's a disaster. And so like people's politics still come into play, especially in parts of the county where it's like a little further out and scarier. Like we have heard a lot of reports of like resource hoarding and like deep racism about who gets what, and like the coming together in the mutual aid is gorgeous, and it requires vigilance. And there are people being very smart and cool about it. Like my friend lives like 30 minutes remotely, and I finally got to see her last night, and she was telling me how she's just been in her holler, in her community center. And the people around her are like not queers like us. And she is like, they're like the church ladies who are running the distro are being shady about who gets what, and are like, don't take too much. And I've heard a lot of this. Particularly of being like, oh, like those, like the Hispanic men come and they take too much of, in like certain, like maybe like more like in certain distros, like, you know, our distro is very much like, obviously, like, take everything you need, we're gonna get more, like, I don't care, take it. But like, you know, people are still people are scared, people lost their homes, people lost everything. And so my friend was saying that there's this like fun little culture that appears where it's like some of the people in charge are a little bit more like hoardy, but then there's like other people a part of the distro who are like, who don't feel that way. So if like someone's showing up and they know that like if they go right into the distro, they're going to get diverted and not get what you want. Like the people that are a little bit more with it are like, hey, park your car over there. Or just like, hey, that generator's coming out of your car, I'm going to put it right in your car. Like people are smart. Like people don't stop being people. Like I hear you, and also politics don't go away. Everyone comes with what they had to begin with. And so we work with what we've got, you know?
That's really unfortunate to hear. That's fucked up. I also have been hearing that like stuff has kind of been getting twisted. So there were reports that I was seeing on TikTok that there was a lot of like looting going on, and that the situation was getting dangerous because, you know, people in desperate times call for desperate measures. And there were reports of looting, and you know, and there's a huge gun culture in North Carolina, so you know, people open carry and whatnot.
Yeah, totally. And more so now in Yancey County, like, you know, my friend was saying, you used to see like, you know, a person open carrying at the grocery store, and now it's like like the guys at all the distros have guns out. And yeah, I will say, like, we got reports of like where we live of like, you know, early on we were like, okay, like don't walk over there by yourself, especially like in the wealthier neighborhoods where everyone just fucking left. Of course people are going to loot those areas. Yeah, I mean, it's been different for sure. And like, I don't feel unsafe. And there's been curfews, which is like a thing that happens in disaster times. And the curfews have been getting later and later. And like, obviously the curfews do what curfews do. And so like, you know, the fucking head of the fire department walked into our bar and like personally assured us that that curfew didn't apply to us. And that it's like for the fire department to like be able to do what they're doing. And he was like, we're not like, Asheville APD is not making arrests. You guys like don't even worry about it, but like we're predominantly white. And then so like when I come out here to like my friends who live out here and have like a POC haven, they're like obviously fucking worried about curfew, and like have, you know, our friends are getting stopped and frisked because they're out after like originally it was like fucking 7:30 p.m. Just like the fuck, like
what the hell? Okay,
it's now 11, but like yeah.
Jesus, holy shit. Well, I guess that could segue into another thing that we wanted to cover in this episode while I have you, is that, you know, Asheville had a very now has an even larger homeless population, but Asheville has always been known for having a large homeless population because there are more social services there and people are, you know, more willing to help out. The homeless there, that's where a lot of homeless people congregate, and of course that also probably accounts for a good portion of the death toll and why so many bodies they're having trouble, I'm sure having even more trouble identifying them, is because a lot of these people don't have ID to on their person to begin with, or family to look for them, or to even verify who they are. And then now there's just huge swaths of the area homeless. What's going on with the people in the shelters? And I also want to talk to you about what happened and is happening with the prisons there
Mm-hmm.
and low-income housing and the nursing homes. Can you talk a bit about all those things?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, let's go in order because, like, you know, I mostly came here to talk about the prisons and talk about prisons and nursing homes and DV shelters and to draw those lines between the people who have been involuntarily made dependents and what happens when you're dependent on like the state and who lose control when you lose power and water. And then you start on a kind of like weird to say, but like maybe lighter note when we talk about like what's happening in the houseless population right now, especially from like the from what I've seen and what I've heard from people because of like the abundance of resource right now. There's everything's a little bit more out in the open. Like my favorite 7-year-old was walking through my neighborhood yesterday and she lives out here in the holler, so she doesn't like walk the streets that much, and she was in town, and there was a houseless encampment where we had where like people are just bringing water everywhere. There's just food and water. Everything is free, especially if you're on like Haywood, like the main areas of town. In downtown and in West Asheville, people are being cool and there's like free food everywhere. You know, like at my distro, people come all the time and there's like, you know, there's more than we could ever need. So there's like clothes and like water and food, and like there was a big water cube out like at an encampment, and my favorite 7-year-old, she was like, oh, I think she like asked a question about it, and her mom was like, yeah, like these people have what they need, they should always have what they need. And like she was able to be like, yeah, like it's good that like people have what they need. And if anything, a lot of the unhoused population is congregated in places in town that didn't flood as much. So like obviously it's fucked up, but we've been sending medics, and like you can't go to hospitals right now. So like there are medic tents at every distro. You know, that was some of the first thing that like our medics were doing was like just wound care. There is like just on this topic, like a feeling that we have is like, holy fuck, we have all of this supply and now all of this money in our Venmos, and we can just like give money to people who aren't going to make rent. And like, we're also going to talk about landlords being shitty, but some landlords are being fantastic and some landlords are evicting people on the 15th. But like, but in one way, it's a little bit utopic right now if you're on Haywood or in downtown, because like if you need water, it's handed to you. If you need a hot meal, it's handed to you. Like, you know, people are putting out water bottles everywhere, and there is this feeling of like, you know, we haven't had to pay for anything. We've just been working and like in community and getting our needs met with each other. So it's this little, you know, like this mutual aid utopia exists for the first 2 weeks. It's obviously starting to go away because it can't last forever. But it's like, oh, we could just have what we need for free and we could just take care of each other. Like, I'm sorry, could we do that all the time? Like, right. But yeah, so right now, theoretically, it seems like confirmed that Buncombe County Jail has been evacuated, but it wasn't as recent as Thursday. We had people doing video visits with people in Buncombe County Jail, which just because we needed information on our people, and there were so many rumors. Like the city was telling us that the prisons had water on like the 4th day, where like no one had water, and like a couple of the fucking hotels in downtown had like tankers. They were starting to bring in tankers of water and like give them away. But like we had rumors from our friends that like in the first few days people were given 1 to 2 bottles of water for 2 days. And that was it. And then we did some video visits on Thursday, and we're told that there was tap water that was coming out black and they were being forced to drink it. That is tied in a little bit to what's been happening in the rest of town on city water, where they're starting to bring back water, but it's sedimenty and potentially highly chlorinated, and still having chemicals in it. So like they put it on in East Asheville and then Shiloh, which is like a historically black neighborhood, and people showered and got sick. So like that's happening on the outside, and so then what the fuck do you think's happening on the inside? You don't have water. Obviously, most people don't have composting toilets. We have flush toilets. So like we were being told that people for like 2 weeks were in cells with like toilets full of shit, and then they were being forced to shit into plastic bags and keep them in their cells. In the first few days, there was no water to make food, so their like meals were like 2 pieces of bread and a fruit cup, and like we heard like 4 saltines and some oatmeal for breakfast, and like really really sparse rations in the beginning. They transferred people out, but the people we were talking to were like, I don't understand why they didn't take us. Courts didn't open until 2 weeks ago. As of Thursday, only 1 person had been released on bail. We were talking to people who had bails over 4K, and it's like, whose family's going to pay that right now? No one's house exists. We have heard reports that all of Buncombe County Jail has now been evacuated. There is a really good piece that The Intercept did on prisons close out in like Black Mountain, which is a little further east, which is like a very flooded area. We were told, our people on the inside told us that at least one section of Buncombe County Jail flooded. We're not sure if they evacuated or not. We know that they didn't let anyone out of their cells for at least a week and a half. Though when we talked to someone last Thursday, which was 2 weeks in, they had just been allowed out of their cells, that people are getting sick, people are getting styes in their eyes because of the insanitary conditions, obviously. We knew county wasn't fun on a good day, but like when you're completely dependent on a system that can't take care of you, what else is going to happen? Of course, you're going to be left behind. So that's one of the things that we're trying to scream bloody murder about right now, of like, thankfully people are out and like people are transferred to other prisons. And it sounds like when people were transferred, they were given a free call to let their loved ones know where they are. So people's loved ones do know where they are. Hopefully people are safer. But like that first week and a half was not a good fucking time to be incarcerated, like it ever is. But yeah, our systems always failed us, and even more deeply so in this moment.
I heard one prisoner died, but I don't know if it's a rumor. Did you hear anything about that?
I haven't heard this one.
Okay. I don't know if it's true, because this is all information I'm hearing like second, third hand.
Yeah, it's all, I mean, we have friends who know people and who pass word on, and we also have names like, you know, we're in communication with the jail support and like bail bond networks, not obviously like bail fund networks that have existed before, and so are tracking people that way, which is where our information is coming from. Yeah, it's really bleak. We also like
that happened in Katrina too.
Yeah,
they
of
didn't
course.
Evacuate the prisons.
Yeah, and like, you know, if we're talking about people who have been dependents and like don't have autonomy, it's like, you know, one side of the story we talked about are like people who have autonomy and are in a really hard situation and are chainsawing their neighbors out of their houses. And then there are people who don't have autonomy to various degrees, like nursing homes, similar thing. Like we've heard up to like as soon as last week that people in nursing homes had like toilets full of feces and no one was flushing them. Yeah, I mean, I have a friend that worked at a smaller facility, and like in the first few days he was like, I don't know how we're gonna do this, but they only had like 8 residents, so like he and his coworkers figured it out, and they started flushing toilets and shoveling shit out like within the first like 3-4 days. But like there are bigger facilities obviously that are like not private like that, and people are sitting in their feces for weeks at a time, and then the elevators don't work, and all of the supplies are on the ground floor, and the people have mobility issues, so they can't get like down to get food. We also know that like that Section 8 housing is being really shitty. It was hard, like some of the bigger areas were like serviced by the community right away, but then it took a lot longer to find out the needs of people in smaller buildings. These are also like kind of big apartment buildings with multiple floors where there's not really a lot of connection, but there are like a lot of them are elderly. Like we met a lot of the supply needs. It's like, you know, disasters, like disaster responses in terms of like, there are, you know, like how am I the fucking person on the phone with an older woman who like doesn't have her insulin and doesn't know how to get it? Like me, that's insane. We also have response to like for example, Maple Crest was like a smaller Section 8 housing building. We gave them a bunch of supplies, like they put them in their community building and like their community area on the ground floor. And then as of like a few days ago, the building management is like, one, you've got to get the supplies out of here. They're not letting people keep the free food in a public place. And then also like anyone that's not on the lease has to go. Obviously, like people have left their houses, so people have like moved in with relatives and shit like that. And the building management is back to their like carceral ways. And it's like, yeah, people could leave, but like, where are they going? Like, how do they know how to get there? No one has a job anymore. Who has money to move right now? Yeah, that's the kind of shit we're thinking about.
And a lot of these places don't have basic utilities on, like water or power. And
we potentially won't have power for months. Or sorry, we had a lot of places of power. People started to have power within the first week. In the counties out like towards Little Switzerland, Yancey County, in the more rural areas, there's estimates of 6 months without power. And so we're like deeply worried. We're trying to get generators. Obviously, like one of the big projects now is propane stoves, generators to like get people through the fucking winter out there. And then, but out there, people have wells and springs. And then, so in town, city water, if you're on city water, the estimate keeps changing. Like they started digging wells for the elementary schools, but like it could absolutely be months before there's water. Like I said earlier, they started bringing in the like sedimenty water, which you can't shower in. There was reports that like don't touch it, don't let your pets drink it, flush your toilets with it. So that might run through our pipes. And it is starting to run through our pipes in some sections. Obviously like restaurants can't open if there's not water, but some of the like bigger ones like Chai Pani like can open if they like buy in a tanker of water, which are like what some restaurants are doing to go back to normal. And like, I don't know, like this is a huge tourist place. Like we all make our money in this season. It's like what we call it leaf season. The mountains are gorgeous. The Blue Ridge Parkway, which you spoke about, doesn't exist anymore. Most of my like our spots that we went to like surely don't exist. You can't get to the Blue Ridge Parkway right now. So like, I hope, please don't come here from Florida to look at our leaves and go out to dinner, which is like how, was supposed to be my income and my friend's income. And so like, we already had a very seasonal economy, and now we kind of just like don't have an economy except for like those like a couple of restaurant groups that can afford like tankers of water, but also just like for who?
Yeah, for who? It's really, words can't even describe how fucked up the situation is. And
can we pause 1 sec? I want to pee, and then my friend is here, so I want to just like let them in and let them sit in the background.
Yeah, go ahead. Take your time.
I'll be right back. And then, do you have an idea of how much longer we're going?
We can wrap it up.
Yeah, if relatively soon. If you have 1 or 2 more questions, I think I've spoken to most of what I want to speak to, but
we can just finish by like, where do you think you'll go from here, and then how can people help, like, and then we can just wrap it up. Is that good?
Cool. Yeah, let me pee, and then I'll be right back.
Awesome. Thank you.
I'm gonna hi. Good. I'm gonna pee. I'm not actually done, but you can sit inside. It's fine. Yeah. Okay, hi.
Awesome. Okay, yes, only just a few more minutes of your time. Thank you.
Oh,
so
it's totally fine.
Doing this. I really, really appreciate it. Okay, so my next question to you is, where do you think you'll go from here? What can you even envision your near future looking like?
Yeah, so like I'm personally kind of a funny person to ask this question to. Um, People have so many layers of relationship on this land. I want to be really clear. I'm not from here. I'm from Long Island. I have deep relationship with this place over the past like almost 10 years. And I mean, I have friends who have generations of relationship on this land, and it's a pretty tricky thing. The way that gentrification has worked here, people coming here, the way that like developers have bought up land here in the past few years is like really intense and like a real sore spot, and like who knows who and who knows what and how it relates to this land. So I just want to be really, really clear that like I'm not fucking from here. I personally come and go from this place and like intend to my whole life. So like I've got partners, jobs, like best friends, places to live. I'm just a freak like that in Anchorage, Alaska, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and here. So like I personally have plans to keep coming and going. A lot of people have questions of like, if I can leave, should I? People who have like jobs other places, like I don't want to take the resources from this place. And then I also have friends who are like, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Like I've always been here. This is where I'm meant to be. This is not going to change how I am. And people have, it obviously feels really shitty to leave. A lot of people left right in the beginning. And if it's the right thing for you to do, it's the right thing for you to do. A lot of people have long-term plans to leave because we don't have jobs anymore. But I mean, it's an incredibly resilient place. It always has been. It's going to continue to be what it is in its core, which is like not the tourism shit. The answer is like we don't know. We're like all in crisis. We're just like, is my like school program gonna start? Like I obviously am not gonna get like a job in a fancy spot. Like some jobs are calling people back to work, and just being different about it. Some people's jobs are pivoting to disaster relief. Like I have friends that work for like kind of big retreat centers who are just now disaster response, and they just have they had community roles for like bigger retreat centers because that's a vibe out here. And now they're just, because they're community liaisons, they just do disaster response and like get generators to people. And so like that's sick. Everyone has a different role. I was always going to come back here for the rest of my life because my people are here. So like I'm going to come back here for the rest of my life, but like I'm going to be gone for the winter at least. Yeah, we don't know. We're figuring it out together. Like it's, a lot of my people are like me, and we're like doing mutual aid every day, and we're like running our distros, and like we're starting to collaborate with other like bigger organizations with more infrastructure to be like, okay, like we need to get people food and water through the winter. We need to get people generators. Like this is like a deep survival thing. So many people lost their homes and are living in tents or like living with friends. Like, we don't have an economy, but we have mutual aid, and then we stop, and then we're like, okay, I guess I need to fill out my own fucking FEMA application and like get that $750 and like figure out unemployment if you had like a restaurant job or something that doesn't exist anymore. And just like there's beautiful resilience. Like for artists, it's like a deep artist community. There's like an art market that used to happen in downtown Marshall on the island that I spoke about, which doesn't exist anymore. They have pivoted. They have found a new location that's going to be outside. Like my artist friends are going to get some of their money, hopefully. Yeah, like it's a deeply woven in place with brilliant people. Like we are gonna like it is gonna be fine. Like people are going to continue to live, and a lot of people are gonna leave, and it's gonna be really different. And it's very in process. And like I've been talking to all my friends about it who have really different ways of relating to this land, and everyone has a different answer for themselves, and we're just all supporting each other to make our best choices and like to continue to love this fucking place as best we can.
Yeah, it's such a special place, and I really hope it can be rebuilt as soon as possible, because like you said, it's a service economy. I read that 50% of the houses there have been turned into Airbnbs in the last like 15 years or so, and So everything needs to be completely reconfigured and reformatted. And then, there's a lot of, it's like Portland, like, well, Asheville at least is like a little Portland, Oregon. So a lot, like you mentioned, a lot of like very transient, people come and go. But then you have people who they've lived there their entire life and they're not leaving their house. They
Well,
will
and
not leave
beneath
their
it, there's
house.
like a very strong intergenerational resiliency. Like that Airbnb shit is just the top of it. And like, we're probably fucking better off without it as long as we can survive here. And so like, it's like someone was telling me, my friend sent her an article a Wall Street Journal article from the other day that said, is Asheville over? And we're just like, by the way you mean it, we fucking hope so. Like,
Yeah, I know. Seriously, man. Okay. Oh, thank you so much for everything that you've been doing. I appreciate it so much. So many people appreciate it so much. All the things that you and your friends have been doing. And my final question to you is, how can people help? I've been hearing conflicting information of how to get donations actually physically there. I mean, and I don't know, maybe you can clarify that if it's true or not, because I think that's also important information. Is it true? Are the rumors true of donations being confiscated by the state, or how can people volunteer if they want to go volunteer? Like, can you just tell us like what's true and how can we help?
I mean, the reason this is so tricky because it shifts day by day. Like we've been in this place where it's like, okay, that supply list you gave me, like, I'm sorry, 48 hours ago, useless to me. Like it is so fast. And we were like, things were getting lost because people were coming where they were getting a supply list. And it's like, yeah, that was 72 hours ago. That was a different fucking world. We don't need that anymore. It's gone. It's done. It's over. It's different.
Yeah.
It's a really good question. I think I would like to like send you a list because I'm not going to be able to just like tell you the list of organizations right now because it's also the organizations are in flux right now. Everyone is kind of recalibrating. We're moving out of the acute phase and into the long-term phase. So it's like there are certainly places that need so much and like they're shifting. Communication is changing all the time of like how you can get to those places because those places are pretty remote. A lot of places are flooded with physical supplies, but also like we'll need shit like 3 months from now, like further out, people are worried about like not tomorrow, but 3 months from now, 6 months from now. So I will send you a list and I think we just need to keep talking about it because it's going to change and don't come here with a car full of supplies on a list you got a week ago. That's useless.
That's a great tip. That's crucial, critical. The last I heard that people really need, well, it's starting to get cold. So obviously winter supplies, right? Would you say winter supplies are needed?
No, and I honestly kind of don't want to speak to it right now because it does shift constantly, and it's like for some people in some places, yes. So like the answer is really just going to be relationship. Is like building long-term relationship to get people exactly what they need instead of flooding people with things like based on the idea of what they need. Is what I would say about that right now.
Okay. All right. Yeah. If you could send me a list, I can attach it to this episode. And as you preface, this is a list for like this week, right?
Yeah, and mostly just of people to keep an eye on to keep supporting.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah. I really hope that the assistance continues months out from now. You know how people are with their short-term memory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's going to be a big deal here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. You're always welcome back on to share what's going on the ground. And of course, message me anytime with anything you may need. I do have friends who have been doing assistance in North Carolina. So if you need anything from the outside world, I can try to help with that.
Thank you so much, Bridget. Really appreciate it. It's good to talk to you.
Thank you, Al. Good to meet you. Thank you so much. And I hope everybody listening enjoyed this and can help in any way that you can. Please help. Please help. And with that, I think that's a wrap.
Great. Thank you so much.
Bye.